Chapter 15 of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 15. Christine, Christine! Raoul's first thought after Christine Daae's fantastic disappearance was to accuse Erik. He no longer doubted the almost supernatural powers of the angel of music in this domain of the opera in which he had set up his empire, and Raoul rushed on the stage in a mad fit of love and despair.
"Christine! Christine!" he
moaned, calling to her as he felt that she must be calling to him from the depths of that dark pit to which the monster had carried her.
"Christine! Christine!"
And he seemed to hear the girl's screams through the frail boards that separated him from her. He bent forward, he listened, he wandered over the stage like a madman. Ah, to descend into that pit of darkness, every entrance to which was closed to him, for the stairs that led below the stage were forbidden to one and all that night.
"Christine! Christine!"
People pushed him aside, laughing. They made fun of him. They thought the poor lover's brain was gone. By what mad road, through what passages of mystery and darkness known to him alone, had Erik dragged that pure-souled child to the awful haunt with the Louis Philippe room opening out onto the lake?
"Christine! Christine! Why don't you answer? Are you alive?"
Hideous thoughts flashed through Raoul's congested brain. Of course, Erik must have discovered their secret, must have known that Christine had played him false. What a vengeance would be his! And Raoul thought again of the yellow stars that had come the night before and roamed over his balcony. Why had he not put them out for good? There were some men's eyes that dilated in the darkness and shone like stars, or like cats' eyes. Certainly Albinos, who seemed to have rabbits' eyes by day, had cat's eyes by night. Everybody knew that. Yes, he had undoubtedly fired at Erik. Why had he not killed him? The monster had fled up the gutter-spout like a cat or a convict, who, everybody knew that also, would scale the very skies with the help of a gutter-spout. No doubt Erik was at that time contemplating some decisive step against Raoul, but he had been wounded and had escaped to turn against poor Christine instead. Such were the cruel thoughts that haunted Raoul as he ran to the singer's dressing-room.
"Christine! Christine!"
Bitter tears scorched the boy's eyelids as he saw, scattered over the furniture, the clothes which his beautiful bride was to have worn at the hour of their flight. Oh, why had she refused to leave earlier? Why had she toyed with the threatening catastrophe? Why toyed with the monster's heart? Why, in a final access of pity, had she insisted on flinging, as a last stop to that demon's soul, her divine song?
Holy angel, in heaven blessed, my spirit longs with thee to rest.
Raoul, his throat filled with sobs, oaths, and insults, fumbled awkwardly at the great mirror that had opened one night, before his eyes, to let Christine pass to the murky dwelling below. He pushed, pressed, groped about, but the glass apparently obeyed no one but Erik. Perhaps actions were not enough with a glass of the kind. Perhaps he was expected to utter some certain words. When he was a little boy, he had heard that there were things that obeyed the spoken word. Suddenly, Raoul remembered something about a gate opening into the Rue Scribe, an underground passage running straight to the Rue Scribe from the lake. Yes, Christine had told him about that. And when he found that the key was no longer in the box, he nevertheless ran to the Rue Scribe. Outside, in the street, he passed his trembling hands over the huge stones, felt for outlets, met with iron bars. Were those they, or these? Or could it be that air-hole? He plunged his useless eyes through the bars. How dark it was in there! He listened. All was silence. He went round the building, and came to the bigger bars, immense gates. It was the entrance to the Cour de l'Administration. Raoul rushed into the doorkeeper's lodge.
"I beg your pardon, madame. Could you tell me where to find a gate or door made of bars, iron bars, opening into the Rue Scribe and leading to the lake. You know the lake I mean. Yes, the underground lake under the opera.
Yes, sir, I know there is a lake under the opera, but I don't know which door leads to it. I have never been there.
And the Rue Scribe, madame, the Rue Scribe. Have you never been to the Rue Scribe?
The woman laughed, screamed with laughter. Raoul darted away, roaring with anger, ran upstairs, 4 stairs at a time, downstairs, rushed through the whole of the business side of the opera house, found himself once more in the light of the stage. He stopped, with his heart thumping in his chest. Suppose Christine Daae had been found? He saw a group of men and asked,
I beg your pardon, gentlemen. Could you tell me where Christine Daae is?
And somebody laughed. At the same moment the stage buzzed with a new sound, and amid a crowd of men in evening dress, all talking and gesticulating together, appeared a man who seemed very calm, and displayed a pleasant face, all pink and chubby-cheeked, crowned with curly hair, and lit up by a wonderful pair of serene blue eyes. Mercier, the acting manager, called the Vicomte de Chagny's attention to him, and said,
This is the gentleman to whom you should put your question, monsieur. Let me introduce Millefroy, the commissary of police.
Ah, Monsieur le Vicomte de Chagny. Delighted to meet you, monsieur,
said the commissary.
Would you mind coming with me? And now, where are the managers? Where are the managers?
Mercier did not answer, and Remy, the secretary, volunteered the information that the managers were locked up in their office, and that they knew nothing as yet of what had happened.
You don't mean to say so. Let us go up to the office.
And Monsieur Mifroid, followed by an ever-increasing crowd, turned towards the business side of the building. Mercier took advantage of the confusion to slip a key into Gabriel's hand.
This is all going very badly,
he whispered.
You had better let Mother Giry out.
And Gabriel moved away. They soon came to the manager's door. Mercier stormed in vain. The door remained closed. At last the door was opened. All rushed into the office on the commissary's heels. Raoul was the last to enter. As he was about to follow the rest into the room, a hand was laid on his shoulder, and he heard these words spoken in his ear.
Erik's secrets concern no one but himself.
He turned around with a stifled exclamation. The hand that was laid on his shoulder was now placed on the lips of a person with an ebony skin, with eyes of jade, and with an ascatran cap on his head. The Persian. The stranger kept up the gesture that recommended discretion, and then, at the moment when the astonished Viscount was about to ask the reason of his mysterious intervention, bowed and disappeared. End of chapter 15. Chapter 16 of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 16. Madame Giry's astounding revelations as to her personal relations with the opera ghost. Before following the commissary into the manager's office, I must describe certain extraordinary occurrences that took place in that office which Remy and Mercier had vainly tried to enter, and into which Messieurs Richard and Moncharmin had locked themselves with an object which the reader does not yet know, but which it is my duty as a historian to reveal without further postponement. I have had the occasion to say that the manager's mood had undergone a disagreeable change for some time past, and to convey the fact that this change was not due only to the fall of the chandelier on the famous night of the gala performance. The reader must know that the ghost had calmly been paid his first 20,000 francs. Oh, there had been wailing and gnashing of teeth, indeed, and yet the thing had happened as simply as could be. One morning the managers found on their table an envelope addressed to
Monsieur O.G., private,
and accompanied by a note from O.G. himself.
The time has come to carry out the clause in the memorandum book. Please put 20 notes of 1,000 francs each into this envelope. Seal it with your own seal, and hand it to Mademoiselle Giry, who will do what is necessary.
The managers did not hesitate. Without wasting time in asking how these confounded communications came to be delivered in an office which they were careful to keep locked, they seized this opportunity of laying hands on the mysterious blackmailer. And after telling the whole story, under the promise of secrecy, to Gabriel and Mercier, they put the 20,000 francs into the envelope, and without asking for explanations, handed it to Madame Giry, who had been reinstated in her functions. The box-keeper displayed no astonishment. I need hardly say that she was well watched. She went straight to the ghost's box, and placed the precious envelope on the little shelf attached to the ledge. The two managers, as well as Gabriel and Mercier, were hidden in such a way that they did not lose sight of the envelope for a second during the performance, and even afterward, for, as the envelope had not moved, those who watched it did not move either, and Madame Giry went away, while the managers, Gabriel and Mercier, were still there. At last they became tired of waiting, and opened the envelope, after ascertaining that the seals had not been broken. At first sight, Richard and Moncharmin thought that the notes were still there, but soon they perceived that they were not the same. The 20 real notes were gone, and had been replaced by 20 notes of the Bank of St. Farce. The manager's rage and fright were unmistakable. Moncharmin wanted to send for the commissary of police, but Richard objected. He had, no doubt, a plan, for he said,
"Don't let us make ourselves ridiculous. All Paris will laugh at us. OG has won the first game. We will win the second."
He was thinking of the next month's allowance. Nevertheless, they had been so absolutely tricked that they were bound to suffer a certain dejection, and upon my word it was not difficult to understand. We must not forget that the managers had an idea at the back of their minds all the time that this strange incident might be an unpleasant practical joke on the part of their predecessors, and that it would not do to divulge it prematurely. On the other hand, Moncharmin was sometimes troubled with a suspicion of Richard himself, who occasionally took fanciful whims into his head, and so they were content to await events, while keeping an eye on Mother Giry. Richard would not have her spoken to.
"If she is a Confederate,"
he said,
"the notes are gone long ago. But in my opinion, she is merely an idiot."
"She's not the only idiot in this business,"
said Moncharmin pensively.
"Well, who could have thought it?"
moaned Richard.
"But don't be afraid. Next time I shall have taken my precautions."
The next time fell on the same day that beheld the disappearance of Christine Daae. In the morning a note from the ghost reminded them that the money was due. It read,
"The time has come to carry out the clause in the memorandum book. Please put 20 notes of 1,000 francs each into this envelope. Seal it with your own seal, and hand it to Mademoiselle Giry, who will do what is necessary."
And the note was accompanied by the usual envelope. They had only to insert the notes. This was done about half an hour before the curtain rose on the first act of Faust. Richard showed the envelope to Moncharmin. Then he counted the 20,000 franc notes in front of him, and put the notes into the envelope, but without closing it.
"And now,"
he said,
"let's have Mother Giry in."
The old woman was sent for. She entered with a sweeping curtsy. She still wore her black taffeta dress, the colour of which was rapidly turning to rust and lilac, to say nothing of the dingy bonnet. She seemed in a good temper. She at once said,
"Good evening, gentlemen. It's for the envelope, I suppose?"
"Yes, Madame Giry."
said Richard most amiably.
"For the envelope, and something else besides."
"At your service, Monsieur Richard. At your service. And what is the something else, please?"
"First of all, Madame Giry, I have a little question to put to you."
"By all means, Monsieur Richard. Madame Giry is here to answer you."
"Are you still on good terms with the ghost?"
"Couldn't be better, sir. Couldn't be better."
"Ah, we are delighted. Look here, Madame Giry,"
said Richard, in the tone of making an important confidence.
We may just as well tell you, among ourselves, you're no fool.
Why, sir,
exclaimed the box-keeper, stopping the pleasant nodding of the black feathers in her dingy bonnet.
I assure you no one has ever doubted that.
We are quite agreed, and we shall soon understand one another. The story of the ghost is all humbug, isn't it? Well, still between ourselves, it has lasted a long enough.
Madame Giry looked at the managers as though they were talking Chinese. She walked up to Richard's table and asked rather anxiously,
What do you mean? I don't understand.
Oh, you understand quite well. In any case, you've got to understand. And first of all, tell us his name.
Whose name?
The name of the man whose accomplice you are, Madame Giry.
I am the ghost's accomplice. I? His accomplice in what, pray?
You do all he wants.
Oh, he's not very troublesome, you know.
And does he still tip you?
I mustn't complain.
How much does he give you for bringing him that envelope?
10 francs.
You poor thing. That's not much, is it?
Why?
I'll tell you that presently, Madame Giry, just now, we should like to know for what extraordinary reason you have given yourself, body and soul, to this ghost. Madame Giry's friendship and devotion are not to be bought for 5 francs or 10 francs.
That's true enough. And I can tell you the reason, sir. There's no disgrace about it. On the contrary.
We are quite sure of that, Madame Giry.
Well, it's like this. Only the ghost doesn't like me to talk about his business.
Indeed?
Sneered Richard.
But this is a matter that concerns myself alone. Well, it was in box 5 one evening. I found a letter addressed to myself, a sort of note written in red ink. I needn't read the letter to you, sir. I know it by heart, and I shall never forget it if I live to be 100.
And Madame Giry, drawing herself up, recited the letter with touching eloquence.
Madam, 1825, Mademoiselle Menetrier, leader of the ballet, became Marquise de Cussy. 1832, Mademoiselle Marie Taglioni, a dancer, became Comtesse Gilbert des Voissons. 1846, Lesota, a dancer, married a brother of the King of Spain. 1847, Lola Montes, a dancer, became the morganatic wife of King Louis of Bavaria, and was created Countess of Landsfeld. 1848, Mademoiselle Maria, a dancer, became Baronne d'Erneville. 1870, Teresa Hessier, a dancer, married Dom Fernando, brother to the King of Portugal.
Richard and Moncharmin listened to the old woman, who, as she proceeded with the enumeration of these glorious nuptials, swelled out, took courage, and at last, in a voice bursting with pride, flung out the last sentence of the prophetic letter.
1885, Meg Giry, Empress.
Exhausted by this supreme effort, the box-keeper fell into a chair, saying,
Gentlemen, the letter was signed. Opera Ghost. I had heard much of the ghost, but only half believed in him. From the day when he declared that my little Meg, the flesh of my flesh, the fruit of my womb, would be empress, I believed in him altogether.
And really it was not necessary to make a long study of Madame Giry's excited features to understand what could be got out of that fine intellect with the 2 words ghost and empress. But who pulled the strings of that extraordinary puppet? That was the question.
You have never seen him. He speaks to you, and you believe all he says?
Asked Moncharmin.
Yes. To begin with, I owe it to him that my little Meg was promoted to be the leader of a row. I said to the ghost, if she is to be empress in 1885, there is no time to lose. She must become a leader at once. He said,
Look upon it as done.
And he had only a word to say to Monsieur Poligny, and the thing was done.
So you see that Monsieur Poligny saw him?
No, not any more than I did. But he heard him. The ghost said a word in his ear, you know, on the evening when he left box 5, looking so dreadfully pale.
Moncharmin heaved a sigh.
What a business.
He groaned.
Ah,
said Madame Giry.
I always thought there were secrets between the ghost and Monsieur Poligny. Anything that the ghost asked Monsieur Poligny to do, Monsieur Poligny did. Monsieur Poligny could refuse the ghost nothing.
You hear, Richard? Poligny could refuse the ghost nothing.
Yes, yes, I hear,
said Richard.
Monsieur Poligny is a friend of the ghost, and as Madame Giry is a friend of Monsieur Poligny, there's we are. But I don't care a hang about Monsieur Poligny,
he added roughly.
The only person whose fate really interests me is Madame Giry. Madame Giry, do you know what is this envelope?
Why, of course not,
she said.
Well, look.
Madame Giry looked into the envelope with a lacklustre eye, which soon recovered its brilliancy.
1,000-franc notes, she cried.
Yes, Madame Giry, 1,000-franc notes, and you know it.
I, sir, I swear.
Don't swear, Madame Giry, and now I will tell you the second reason why I sent for you. Madame Giry, I am going to have you arrested.
The 2 black feathers on the dingy bonnet, which usually affected the attitude of 2 notes of interrogation, changed into 2 notes of exclamation. As for the bonnet itself, it swayed in menace on the old lady's tempestuous chignon. Surprise, indignation, protest, and dismay were furthermore displayed by little Meg's mother in a sort of extravagant moment of offended virtue, half bound, half slide, that brought her right under the nose of Monsieur Richard, who could not help pushing back his chair.
Have me arrested?
The mouth that spoke those words seemed to spit the 3 teeth that were left in it into Richard's face. Monsieur Richard behaved like a hero. He retreated no farther. His threatening forefinger seemed already to be pointing out the keeper of Box 5 to the absent magistrates.
I am going to have you arrested, Madame Giry, as a thief.
Say that again.
And Madame Giry caught Mr. Manager Richard a mighty box on the ear before Monsieur Manager Moncharmin had time to intervene. But it was not the withered hand of the angry old beldame that fell on the managerial ear, but the envelope itself. The cause of all the trouble, the magic envelope that opened with the blow, scattering the banknotes, which escaped in a fantastic whirl of giant butterflies. The 2 managers gave a shout, and the same thought made them both go on their knees feverishly, picking up and hurriedly examining the precious scraps of paper.
Are they still genuine, Moncharmin?
Are they still genuine, Richard?
Yes,
they are still genuine.
Above their heads, Madame Giry's 3 teeth were clashing in a noisy contest, full of hideous interjections. But all that could be clearly distinguished was this leitmotif.
I, a thief! I, a thief! I!
She choked with rage. She shouted,
I never heard of such a thing.
And suddenly she darted up to Richard again.
In any case,
she yelped,
you, Monsieur Richard, ought to know better than I where the 20,000 francs went to.
I?
Asked Richard, astounded.
And how should I know?
Moncharmin, looking severe and dissatisfied, at once insisted that the good lady should explain herself.
What does this mean, Madame Giry?
He asked.
And why do you say that Monsieur Richard ought to know better than you where the 20,000 francs went to?
As for Richard, who felt himself turning red under Moncharmin's eyes, he took Madame Giry by the wrist and shook it violently. In a voice growling and rolling like thunder, he roared,
Why should I know better than you where the 20,000 francs went to? Why? Answer me.
Because they went into your pocket,
gasped the old woman, looking at him as if he were the devil incarnate. Richard would have rushed upon Madame Giry if Moncharmin had not stayed his avenging hand and hastened to ask her more gently.
How can you suspect my partner, Monsieur Richard, for putting 20,000 francs in his pocket?
I never said that,
declared Madame Giry,
seeing that it was myself who put the 20,000 francs into Monsieur Richard's pocket.
And she added under her voice,
There, it's out, and may the ghost forgive me.
Richard began bellowing anew, but Moncharmin authoritatively ordered him to be silent.
Allow me. Let the woman explain herself. Let me question her.
And he added,
It is really astonishing that you should take up such a tone. We are on the verge of clearing up the whole mystery, and you're in a rage. You're wrong to behave like that. I'm enjoying myself immensely.
Madame Giry, like the martyr that she was, raised her head, her face beaming with faith in her own innocence.
You tell me there were 20,000 francs in the envelope which I put into Monsieur Richard's pocket. But I tell you again that I knew nothing about it. nor Monsieur Richard either, for that matter.
Aha!
said Richard, suddenly assuming a swaggering air which Moncharmin did not like.
I knew nothing either. You put 20,000 francs in my pocket, and I knew nothing either. I am very glad to hear it, Madame Giry.
Yes.
The terrible dame agreed.
Yes, it's true. We neither of us knew anything. But you must have ended by finding out.
Richard would certainly have swallowed Madame Giry alive if Moncharmin had not been there. But Moncharmin protected her. He resumed the questions.
What sort of envelope did you put in Monsieur Richard's pocket? It was not the one which we gave you, the one which you took to box 5 before our eyes, and yet that was the one which contained the 20,000 francs.
I beg your pardon. The envelope which Monsieur le Directeur gave me was the one which I slipped into Monsieur le Directeur's pocket,
explained Madame Giry.
The one which I took to the ghost box was another envelope, just like it, which the ghost gave me beforehand, and which I hid up my sleeve.
So saying, Madame Giry took from her sleeve an envelope ready prepared and similarly addressed to that containing the 20,000 francs. The managers took it from her. They examined it, and saw that it was fastened with seals stamped with their own managerial seal. They opened it. It contained 20 Bank of St. Farce notes like those which had so much astounded them the month before.
How simple,
said Richard.
How simple,
repeated Moncharmin, and he continued with his eyes fixed upon Madame Giry as though trying to hypnotize her.
So, it was the ghost who gave you this envelope and told you to substitute it for the one which we gave you, and it was the ghost who told you to put the other into Monsieur Richard's pocket?
Yes, it was the ghost.
Then would you mind giving us a specimen of your little talents? Here is the envelope. Act as though we knew nothing.
As you please, gentlemen.
Madame Giry took the envelope with the 20 notes inside it and made for the door. She was on the point of going out when the 2 managers rushed at her.
Oh no. We're not going to be done
a
a second
time.
Once
bitten, twice shy.
I beg your pardon, gentlemen,
said the old woman in self-excuse.
You told me to act as though you knew nothing. Well, if you knew nothing, I should go away with your envelope.
And then how would you slip it into my pocket?
Argued Richard, whom Moncharmin fixed with his left eye, while keeping his right on Madame Giry, a proceeding likely to strain his sight, but Moncharmin was prepared to go to any length to discover the truth.
I am to slip it into your pocket when you least expect it, sir. You know that I always take a little turn behind the scenes, in the course of the evening, and I often go with my daughter to the ballet foyer, which I'm entitled to do, as her mother. I bring her shoes when the ballet is about to begin. In fact, I come and go as I please. The subscribers come and go too. So do you, sir. There are lots of people about. I go behind you, and slip the envelope into the tail pocket of your dress coat. There's no witchcraft about that.
No witchcraft?
Growled Richard, rolling his eyes like Jupiter Tonans.
No witchcraft? Why, I've just caught you in a lie, you old witch!
Madame Giry bristled, with her 3 teeth sticking out of her mouth.
And why, may I ask?
Because I spent that evening watching box 5 and the sham envelope which you put there. I did not go to the ballet foyer for a second.
No, sir, and I did not give you the envelope that evening, but at the next performance, on the evening when the Under-Secretary of State for Fine Arts.
At these words, Monsieur Richard suddenly interrupted Madame Giry.
Yes, that's true. I remember now. The Under-Secretary went behind the scenes. He asked me. I went down to the ballet foyer for a moment. I saw on the foyer steps the Under-Secretary and his chief clerk were in the foyer itself. I suddenly turned around. You had passed behind me, Madame Giry. You seemed to push against me. Oh! I can see you still. I can see you still.
Yes, that's it, sir. That's it. I had just finished my little business. That pocket of yours, sir, is very handy.
And Madame Giry once more suited the action to the word. She passed behind Monsieur Richard, and so nimbly that Moncharmin himself was impressed by it, slipped the envelope into the pocket of one of the tails of Monsieur Richard's dress coat.
Of course,
examined Richard, turning a little pale.
It's very clever, Augie. The problem which he had to solve was this. how to do away with any dangerous intermediary between the man who gives the 20,000 francs and the man who receives it. And by far the best thing he could hit upon was to come and take the money from my pocket without my noticing it, as I myself did not know that it was there. It's wonderful.
Oh, wonderful, no doubt.
Moncharmin agreed.
Only you forget, Richard, that I provided 10,000 francs of the 20, and that nobody put anything in my pocket.
End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 17. The Safety Pin Again. Moncharmin's last phrase so dearly expressed the suspicion in which he now held his partner that it was bound to cause a stormy explanation, at the end of which it was agreed that Richard should yield to all Moncharmin's wishes, with the object of helping him to discover the miscreant who was victimizing them. This brings us to the interval after the Garden Act, with the strange conduct observed by Monsieur Chagny and those curious lapses from the dignity that might be expected of the managers. It was arranged between Richard and Moncharmin, first, that Richard should repeat the exact movements which he had made on the night of the disappearance of the first 20,000 francs, and second, that Moncharmin should not for an instant lose sight of Richard's coat-tail pocket, into which Madame Giry was to slip the 20,000 francs. Monsieur Richard went and placed himself at the identical spot where he had stood when he bowed to the Under-Secretary for Fine Arts. Monsieur Moncharmin took up his position a few steps behind him. Madame Giry passed, rubbed against Monsieur Richard, got rid of her 20,000 francs in the manager's coat-tail pocket, and disappeared. Or rather, she was conjured away. In accordance with the instructions received from Moncharmin a few minutes earlier, Mercier took the good lady to the acting manager's office and turned the key on her, thus making it impossible for her to communicate with her ghost. Meanwhile, Monsieur Richard was bending and bowing and scraping and walking backward, just as if he had that high and mighty minister, the Under-Secretary for Fine Arts, before him. Only, though these marks of politeness would have created no astonishment if the Under-Secretary of State had really been in front of Monsieur Richard, they caused an easily comprehensible amazement to the spectators of this very natural but quite inexplicable scene when Monsieur Richard had no body in front of him. Monsieur Richard bowed to nobody, bent his back before nobody, and walked backwards before nobody. And a few steps behind him, Monsieur Moncharmin did the same thing that he was doing, in addition to pushing away Monsieur Chagny, and begging Monsieur de la Borderie, the ambassador, and the manager of the Credit Central, not to touch Monsieur le Directeur. Moncharmin, who had his own ideas, did not want Richard to come to him presently, when the 20,000 francs were gone, and say,
Perhaps it was the ambassador. Oh, the manager of the Credit Central. Oh, Remy!
The more so as, at the time of the first scene, as Richard himself admitted, Richard had met nobody in the part of the theatre after Madame Giry had brushed up against him. Having begun by walking backward in order to bow, Richard continued to do so from prudence until he reached the passage leading to the offices of the management. In this way he was constantly watched by Moncharmin from behind, and himself kept an eye on anyone approaching from the front. Once more, this novel method of walking behind the scenes, adopted by the managers of our National Academy of Music, attracted attention, but the managers themselves thought of nothing but the 20,000 francs. On reaching the half-dark passage, Richard said to Moncharmin in a low voice,
I am sure that nobody has touched me. You had now better keep at some distance from me and watch me till I come to the door of the office. It is better not to arouse suspicion, and we can see anything that happens.
But Moncharmin replied,
No, Richard, no. You walk ahead and I'll walk immediately behind you. I won't leave you by a step.
But in that case,
exclaimed Richard,
they will never steal our 20,000 francs.
I should hope not, indeed,
declared Moncharmin.
Then what we are doing is absurd.
We are doing exactly what we did last time. Last time I joined you as you were leaving the stage and followed close behind you down this passage.
That's true,
sighed Richard, shaking his head and passively obeying Moncharmin. 2 minutes later, the joint managers locked themselves into their office. Moncharmin himself put the key in his pocket.
We remained locked up like this last time,
he said,
until you left the opera to go home.
That's so. No one came and disturbed us, I suppose.
No one.
Then,
said Richard, who was trying to collect his memory.
Then I must certainly have been robbed on my way home from the opera.
No,
said Moncharmin in a drier tone than ever.
No, that's impossible, for I dropped you in my cab. The 20,000 francs disappeared at your place. There's not a shadow of a doubt about that.
It's incredible,
protested Richard.
I am sure of my servants, and if one of them had done it, he would have disappeared since.
Moncharmin shrugged his shoulders, as though to say he did not wish to enter into details, and Richard began to think that Moncharmin was treating him in a very insupportable fashion.
Moncharmin, I've had enough of this.
Richard, I've had too much of it.
Do you dare to suspect me?
Yes, of a silly joke.
One doesn't joke with 20,000 francs.
That's what I think,
declared Moncharmin, and ostentatiously studying its contents.
What are you doing?
asked Richard.
Are you going to read the paper next?
Yes, Richard, until I take you home.
Like last time?
Yes, like last time.
Richard snatched the paper from Moncharmin's hands. Moncharmin stood up, more irritated than ever, and found himself faced by an exasperated Richard, who, crossing his arms on his chest, said,
Look here, I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of what I might think if, like last time, after my spending the evening alone with you, you brought me home, and if at the moment of parting, I perceived that 20,000 francs had disappeared from my coat pocket, like last time.
And what might you think?
asked Moncharmin, crimson with rage.
I might think that as you hadn't left me by a foot's breadth, and as by your own wish you were the only one to approach me, like last time, I might think that if that 20,000 francs was no longer in my pocket, it stood a very good chance of being in yours.
Moncharmin leaped up at the suggestion.
Oh,
he shouted.
A safety pin.
What do you want a safety pin for?
To fasten you up with. A safety pin. A safety pin!
Do you want to fasten me with a safety pin?
Yes, to fasten you to the 20,000 francs. Then whether it's here, or on the drive from here to your place, or at your place, you will feel the hand that pulls at your pocket, and you will see if it's mine. Oh, so you're suspecting me now, are you? A safety pin!
And that was the moment when Moncharmin opened the door on the passage and shouted,
A safety pin! Somebody give me a safety pin!
And we also know how, at the same moment, Remy, who had no safety pin, was received by Moncharmin, while a boy procured the pin so eagerly longed for. And what happened was this. Moncharmin first locked the door again. Then he knelt down behind Richard's back.
I hope,
he said,
that the notes are still there.
So do I,
said Richard.
The real ones?
asked Moncharmin, resolved not to be had this time.
Look for yourself,
said Richard.
I refuse to touch them.
Moncharmin took the envelope from Richard's pocket and drew out the banknotes with a trembling hand. For this time, in order frequently to make sure of the presence of the notes, he had not sealed the envelope nor even fastened it. He felt reassured on finding that they were all there and quite genuine. He put them back in the tail pocket and pinned them with great care. Then he sat down behind Richard's coat-tails and kept his eyes fixed on them, while Richard, sitting at his writing-table, did not stir.
A little patience, Richard,
said Moncharmin.
We have only a few minutes to wait. The clock will soon strike 12. Last time we left at the last stroke of 12.
Oh, I shall have all the patience necessary.
The time passed. Slow, heavy, mysterious, stifling. Richard tried to laugh.
I shall end by believing in the omnipotence of the ghost,
he said.
Just now, don't you find something uncomfortable, disquieting, alarming in the atmosphere of this room?
You're quite right,
said Moncharmin, who was really impressed.
The ghost,
continued Richard in a low voice, as though fearing lest he should be overheard by invisible ears.
The ghost. Suppose, all the same, it were a ghost who put the magic envelopes on the table, who talks in box 5, who killed Joseph Buquet, who unhooks the chandelier, and who robs us. For after all, there is no one here except you and me. And if the notes disappear, and neither you nor I have anything to do with it, well, we shall have to believe in the ghost. In the ghost!
At that moment, the clock on the mantelpiece gave its warning click, and the first stroke of 12 struck. The two managers shuddered. The perspiration streamed from their foreheads. The 12th stroke sounded strangely in their ears. When the clock stopped, they gave a sigh and rose from their chairs.
I think we can go now,
said Moncharmin.
I think so.
Richard agreed.
Before we go, do you mind if I look in your pocket?
But of course, mon ami. You must. Well?
He asked, as Moncharmin was feeling at the pocket.
Well, I can feel the pin.
Of course, as you said, we can't be robbed without noticing it.
But Moncharmin, whose hands were still fumbling, bellowed.
I can feel the pin, but I can't feel the notes.
Come, no joking, Moncharmin. This isn't the time for it.
Well, feel for yourself.
Richard tore off his coat. The two managers turned the pocket inside out. The pocket was empty. And the curious thing was that the pin remained stuck in the same place. Richard and Moncharmin turned pale. There was no longer any doubt about the witchcraft.
The ghost,
muttered Moncharmin, but Richard suddenly sprang upon his partner.
No one but you has touched my pocket. Give me back my 20,000 francs. Give me back my 20,000 francs!
On my soul,
sighed Moncharmin, who was ready to swoon.
On my soul, I swear that I haven't got it.
Then somebody knocked at the door. Moncharmin opened it automatically, seemed hardly to recognize Mercier, his business manager, exchanged a few words with him without knowing what he was saying, and with an unconscious movement put the safety pin, for which he had no further use, into the hands of his bewildered subordinate. End of chapter 17. Of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 18. The Commissary, the Viscount, and the Persian. The first words of the Commissary of Police on entering the manager's office were to ask after the missing prima donna.
Is Christine Daae here?
Christine Daae? Here?
Echoed Richard.
No. Why?
As for Moncharmin, he had not the strength left to utter a word. Richard repeated, for the commissary and the compact crowd which had followed him into the office observed an impressive silence.
Why do you ask if Christine Daae is here, Monsieur le Commissaire?
Because she has to be found,
declared the commissary of police solemnly.
What do you mean? She has to be found? Has she disappeared?
In the middle of the performance.
In the middle of the performance? This is extraordinary.
Isn't it? And what is quite as extraordinary is that you should first learn it from me.
Yes?
Said Richard, taking his head in his hands and muttering.
What is this new business? Oh! It's enough to make a man send in his resignation.
And he pulled a few hairs out of his moustache without even knowing what he was doing.
So, she So she disappeared in the middle of the performance?
He repeated.
Yes, she was carried off in the prison act, at the moment when she was invoking the aid of angels. But I doubt if she was carried off by an angel.
And I am sure that she was.
Everybody looked round. A young man, pale and trembling with excitement, repeated.
I am sure of it.
Sure of what?
Asked Millefoy.
That Christine Daae was carried off by an angel, Monsieur le Commissaire, and I can tell you his name.
Ha! Monsieur le Vicomte de Chagny. So you maintain that Christine Daae was carried off by an angel of the opera, no doubt?
Yes, monsieur, by an angel of the opera, and I will tell you where he lives, when we are alone.
You are right, monsieur.
And the commissary of police, inviting Raoul to take a chair, cleared the room of all the rest, excepting the managers. Then Raoul spoke.
Monsieur le Commissaire, the angel is called Erik, and he lives in the opera, and he is the angel of music.
The angel of music? Really? That is very curious. The angel of music.
And, turning to the managers, Monsieur Millefoy asked,
Have you an angel of music on the premises, gentlemen?
Richard and Moncharmin shook their heads without even speaking.
Oh,
said the Viscount.
Those gentlemen have heard of the opera ghost. Well, I am in a position to state that the opera ghost and the angel of music are one and the same person, and his real name is Erik.
Monsieur Millefoy rose and looked at Raoul attentively.
I beg your pardon, monsieur, but is it your intention to make fun of the law? And if not, what is this all about the opera ghost?
I say that these gentlemen have heard of him.
Gentlemen, it appears that you know the opera ghost?
Richard rose, with the remaining hairs of his moustache in his hand.
No, Monsieur Commissary. No, we do not know him. But we wish that we did, for this very evening he has robbed us of 20,000 francs.
And Richard turned a terrible look on Moncharmin, which seemed to say,
Give me back the 20,000 francs, or I'll tell the whole story.
Moncharmin understood what he meant, for, with a distracted gesture, he said,
Oh, tell everything and have it done with.
As for Millefoy, he looked at the managers and at Raoul by turns, and wondered whether he had strayed into a lunatic asylum. He passed his hand through his hair.
A ghost,
he said,
who on the same evening carries off an opera singer and steals 20,000 francs is a ghost who must have his hands very full. If you don't mind, we will take the questions in order. The singer first, the 20,000 francs after. Come, Monsieur de Chagny, let us try to talk seriously. You believe that Mademoiselle Christine Daae has been carried off by an individual called Erik? Do you know this person? Have you seen him?
Yes.
Where?
In a churchyard.
Monsieur Millefoy gave a start, began to scrutinize Raoul again, and said,
Oh, of course. That's where ghosts usually hang out. And what were you doing in that churchyard?
Monsieur,
said Raoul,
I can quite understand how absurd my replies must seem to you, but I beg you to believe that I am in full possession of my faculties. The safety of the person dearest to me in the world is at stake. I should like to convince you in a few words, for time is pressing and every minute is valuable. Unfortunately, if I do not tell you the strangest story that ever was, from the beginning, you will not believe me. I will tell you all I know about the opera ghost, Monsieur le Commissaire. Alas, I do not know much.
Never mind. Go on. Go on.
Exclaimed Richard and Moncharmin, suddenly greatly interested. Unfortunately for their hopes of learning some detail that could put them on the track of their hoaxer, they were soon compelled to accept the fact that Monsieur Raoul de Chagny had completely lost his head. All that story about Perrault's Guirec, the death's heads and enchanted violins, could only have taken birth in the disordered brain of a youth mad with love. It was evident also that Mr. Commissary Mifroid shared their view, and the magistrate would certainly have cut short the incoherent narrative, if circumstances had not taken it upon themselves to interrupt it. The door opened, and a man entered, curiously dressed in an enormous frock coat and a tall hat, at once shabby and shiny, that came down to his ears. He went up to the commissary and spoke to him in a whisper. It was doubtless a detective come to deliver an important communication. During this conversation, M. Mifroid did not take his eyes off Raoul. At last, addressing him, he said,
Monsieur, we have talked enough about the ghost. We will now talk about yourself a little, if you have no objection. You were to carry off Mademoiselle Christine Daae tonight?
Yes, Monsieur le Commissaire.
After the performance?
Yes, Monsieur le Commissaire.
All the arrangements were made?
Yes, Monsieur le Commissaire.
The carriage that brought you was to take you both away. There were fresh horses in readiness at every stage.
That is true, Monsieur le Commissaire.
And nevertheless your carriage is still outside the rotunda, waiting your orders, is it not?
Yes, Monsieur le Commissaire.
Did you know that there were 3 other carriages there, in addition to yours?
I did not pay the least attention.
They were the carriages of Mademoiselle Sorelli, which could not find room in the Corps de l'Administration, of Carlotta, and of your brother, Monsieur le Vicomte de Chagny.
Very likely.
What is certain is that, though your carriage and Sorelli's and Carlotta's are still there by the rotunda pavement, Monsieur le Vicomte de Chagny's carriage is gone.
This has nothing to say to...
I beg your pardon. Was not Monsieur le Comte opposed to your marriage with Mademoiselle Daae?
That is a matter that only concerns the family.
You have answered my question. He was opposed to it. And that was why you were carrying Christine Daae out of your brother's reach. Well, Monsieur de Chagny, allow me to inform you that your brother has been smarter than you. It is he who has carried off Christine Daae.
Oh, impossible!
Moaned Raoul, pressing his hand to his heart.
Are you sure?
Immediately after the artist's disappearance, which was procured by means which we have still to ascertain, he flung into his carriage, which drove right across Paris at a furious pace.
Across Paris?
Asked poor Raoul in a hoarse voice.
What do you mean by across Paris?
Across Paris and out of Paris, by the Brussels road.
Oh!
Cried the young man.
I shall catch them!
And he rushed out of the office.
And bring her back to us,
cried the commissary gaily.
That's a trick worth 2 of the Angel of Music's.
And turning to his audience, M. Mifroid delivered a little lecture on police methods.
I don't know for a moment whether Monsieur le Comte de Chagny has really carried Christine Daae off or not. But I want to know. And I believe that, at this moment, no one is more anxious to inform us than his brother. And now he is flying in pursuit of him. He is my chief auxiliary. This, gentlemen, is the art of the police, which is believed to be so complicated, and which, nevertheless, appears so simple as soon as you see that it consists in getting your work done by people who have nothing to do with the police.
But Monsieur le Commissaire de Police Mifroid would not have been quite so satisfied with himself if he had known that the rush of his rapid emissary was stopped at the entrance to the very first corridor. A tall figure blocked Raoul's way.
Where are you going so fast, Monsieur de Chagny?
Asked a voice. Raoul impatiently raised his eyes and recognized the astrakhan cap of an hour ago. He stopped.
It's you!
He cried in a feverish voice.
You who know Erik's secrets and don't want me to speak of them, who are you?
You know who I am. I am the Persian.
End of chapter 18. Chapter 19 of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 19. The Viscount and the Persian. Raoul now remembered that his brother had once shown him that mysterious person of whom nothing was known except that he was a Persian, and that he lived in a little old-fashioned flat in the Rue de Rivoli. The man with the ebony skin, the eyes of jade, and the astrakhan cap bent over Raoul.
I hope, Monsieur de Chagny,
he said,
that you have not betrayed Erik's secret.
And why should I hesitate to betray that monster, sir?
Raoul rejoined haughtily, trying to shake off the intruder.
Is he your friend by any chance?
I hope that you said nothing about Erik, sir, because Erik's secret is also Christine Daae's, and to talk about one is to talk about the other.
Oh, sir,
said Raoul, becoming more and more impatient.
You seem to know about many things that interest me, and yet I have no time to listen to you.
Once more, Monsieur de Chagny, where are you going so fast?
Can you not guess? To Christine Daae's assistance.
Then, sir, stay here, for Christine Daae is here.
With Erik?
With Erik.
How do you know?
I was at the performance, and no one in the world but Erik could contrive an objection like that. Oh,
he said with a deep sigh.
I recognize the monster's touch.
You know him, then?
The Persian did not reply, but heaved a fresh sigh.
Sir,
said Raoul,
I do not know what your intentions are, but can you do anything to help me? I mean to help Christine Daae.
I think so, Monsieur de Chagny, and that is why I spoke to you.
What can you do?
Try to take you to her, and to him.
Oh, if you can do me that service, sir, my life is yours. One word more. The commissary of police tells me that Christine Daae has been carried off by my brother, Count Philippe.
Oh, Monsieur de Chagny, I don't believe a word of it.
It's not possible, is it?
I don't know if it is possible or not, but there are ways and ways of carrying people off, and Monsieur le Comte Philippe has never, as far as I know, had anything to do with witchcraft.
Your arguments are convincing, sir, and I am a fool. Oh, let us make haste. I place myself entirely in your hands. How should I not believe you when you are the only one to believe me? When you are the only one not to smile when Erik's name is mentioned.
And the young man impetuously seized the Persian's hands. They were ice cold.
Silence,
said the Persian, stopping and listening to the distant sounds of the theatre.
We must not mention that name here. Let us say he and him. Then there will be less danger of attracting his attention.
Do you think he's near us?
It is quite possible, sir, if he is not at this moment with his victim in the house on the lake.
Ah, so you know that house too?
If he is not there, he may be here, in this wall, in this floor, in this ceiling. Come.
And the Persian, asking Raoul to deaden the sound of his footsteps, led him down passages which Raoul had never seen before, even at the time when Christine used to take him for walks through that labyrinth.
If only Darius has come,
said the Persian.
Who is Darius?
Darius? My servant.
They were now in the centre of a real deserted square, an immense apartment ill lit by a small lamp. The Persian stopped Raoul, and in the softest of whispers asked,
What did you say to the commissary?
I said that Christine Daae's abductor was the angel of music, alias the opera ghost, and that the real name was...
Hush! And did he believe you?
No.
He attached no importance to what you said?
No.
He took you for a bit of a madman?
Yes.
So much the better,
sighed the Persian, and they continued their road. After going up and down several staircases which Raoul had never seen before, the two men found themselves in front of a door which the Persian opened with a master key. The Persian and Raoul were both, of course, in dress clothes, but whereas Raoul had a tall hat, the Persian wore the astrakhan cap which I have already mentioned. It was an infringement of the rule which insists upon the tall hat behind the scenes, but in France foreigners are allowed every license, the Englishman his travelling cap, the Persian his cap of astrakhan.
"Sir,"
said the Persian,
"your tall hat will be in your way. You would do well to leave it in the dressing-room."
What dressing-room?
asked Raoul.
Christine Daae's.
And the Persian, letting Raoul through the door which he had just opened, showed him the actress's room opposite. They were at the end of the passage the whole length of which Raoul had been accustomed to traverse before knocking at Christine's door.
How well you know the opera, sir.
Not so well as he does,
said the Persian modestly, and he pushed the young man into Christine's dressing-room, which was as Raoul had left it a few minutes earlier. Closing the door, the Persian went to a very thin partition that separated the dressing-room from a big lumber-room next to it. He listened and then coughed loudly. There was a sound of someone stirring in the lumber-room, and a few seconds later a finger tapped at the door.
"Come in,"
said the Persian. A man entered, also wearing an astrakhan cap and dressed in a long overcoat. He bowed and took a richly carved case from under his coat, put it on the dressing-table, bowed once again, and went to the door.
"Did no one see you come in, Darius?"
No, master.
"Let no one see you go out."
The servant glanced down the passage and swiftly disappeared. The Persian opened the case. It contained a pair of long pistols.
"When Christine Daae was carried off, sir, I sent word to my servant to bring me these pistols. I have had them a long time, and they can be relied upon."
Do you mean to fight a duel?
asked the young man.
"It will certainly be a duel which we shall have to fight,"
said the other, examining the priming of his pistols.
"And what a duel!"
Handing one of the pistols to Raoul, he added,
"In this duel we shall be 2-1, but you must be prepared for everything, for we shall be fighting the most terrible adversary that you can imagine. But you love Christine Daae, do you not?"
I worship the ground she stands on. But you, sir, who do not love her, tell me why I find you ready to risk your life for her. You must certainly hate Erik.
"No, sir,"
said the Persian sadly.
"I do not hate him. If I hated him, he would long ago have ceased doing harm.
Has he done you harm?
I have forgiven him the harm which he has done me."
I do not understand you. You treat him as a monster, you speak of his crime. He has done you harm, and I find in you the same inexplicable pity that drove me to despair when I saw it in Christine.
The Persian did not reply. He fetched a stool and set it against the wall facing the great mirror that filled the whole of the wall space opposite. Then he climbed on the stool, and with his nose to the wallpaper seemed to be looking for something.
"Ah,"
he said after a long search.
"I have it."
And, raising his finger above his head, he pressed against a corner in the pattern of the paper. Then he turned round and jumped off the stool.
"In half a minute,"
he said,
"he shall be on his road."
And crossing the whole of the dressing-room, he felt the great mirror.
"No, it is not yielding yet,"
he muttered.
Oh, are we going out by the mirror?
asked Raoul.
Like Christine Daae?
"So you knew that Christine Daae went out by that mirror?"
She did so before my eyes, sir. I was hidden behind the curtain of the inner room, and I saw her vanish not by the glass, but in the glass.
"And what did you do?"
I thought it was an aberration of my senses, a mad dream.
"Or some new fancy of the ghost's?"
chuckled the Persian.
"Ah, Monsieur de Chagny,"
he continued, still with his hand on the mirror.
"would that we had to do with a ghost. We could then leave our pistols in their case. Put down your hat, please. There. And now cover your shirt front up as much as you can with your coat, as I am doing. Bring the lapels forward. Turn up the collar. We must make ourselves as invisible as possible."
Bearing against the mirror, after a short silence, he said,
"It takes some time to release the counterbalance, when you press on the spring from the inside of the room. It is different when you are behind the wall and can act directly on the counterbalance. Then the mirror turns at once, and is moved with incredible rapidity.
What counterbalance?
Asked Raoul.
Why, the counterbalance that lifts the whole of this wall on to its pivot. You surely don't expect it to move of itself by enchantment. If you watch, you will see the mirror first rise an inch or two, and then shift an inch or two from left to right. It will then be on a pivot and will swing round.
It's not turning,
said Raoul impatiently.
Oh, wait. You have time enough to be impatient, sir. The mechanism has obviously become rusty, or else the spring isn't working. Unless it is something else,
added the Persian anxiously.
What?
He may simply have cut the cord of the counterbalance and blocked the whole apparatus.
Why should he? He does not know that we are coming this way?
I dare say he suspects it, for he knows that I understand the system.
It's not turning. And Christine, sir? Christine?
We shall do all that it is humanly possible to do. But he may stop us at the first step. He commands the walls, the doors, and the trapdoors. In my country he was known by a name which means the trapdoor lover,
said the Persian coldly.
But why do these walls obey him alone? He did not build them.
Yes, sir, that is just what he did.
Raoul looked at him in amazement, but the Persian made a sign to him as to be silent, and pointed to the glass. There was a sort of shivering reflection. Their image was troubled, as in a rippling sheet of water, and then all became stationary again.
You see, sir, that it is not turning. Let us take another road.
Tonight there is no other,
declared the Persian, in a singularly mournful voice.
And now, look out, and be ready to fire.
He himself raised his pistol opposite the glass. Raoul imitated his movement. With his free arm, the Persian drew the young man to his chest, and suddenly the mirror turned in a blinding daze of cross lights. It turned like one of those revolving doors which have lately been fixed to the entrances of most restaurants. It turned, carrying Raoul and the Persian with it, and suddenly hurling them from the full light into the deepest darkness. End of chapter 19. Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 20. In the Cellars of the Opera.
Your hand high, ready to fire,
repeated Raoul's companion quickly, the wall behind them, having completed the circle which it described upon itself, closed again, and the two men stood motionless for a moment, holding their breath. At last the Persian decided to make a movement, and Raoul heard him slip on his knees and feel for something in the dark with his groping hands. Suddenly the darkness was made visible to them by a small lantern, and Raoul instinctively stepped backwards as though to escape the scrutiny of a secret enemy. But then he perceived that the light belonged to the Persian, whose movements he was closely observing. A little red disc was turned in every direction, and Raoul saw that the floor, the walls, and the ceiling were all formed of planking. It must have been the ordinary road taken by Erik to reach Christine's dressing-room and impose upon her innocence, and Raoul, remembering the Persian's remark, thought that it had been mysteriously constructed by the ghost himself. Later, he learned that Erik had found, all prepared for him, a secret passage, long known to himself alone, and contrived at the time of the Paris Commune to allow the jailers to convey their prisoners straight to the dungeons that had been constructed for them in the cellars, for the Federates had occupied the Opera House immediately after the 18th of March, and had made a starting-place right at the top for their Montgolfier balloons, which carried their incendiary proclamations to the departments, and a state prison right at the bottom. The Persian went on his knees and put his lantern on the ground. He seemed to be working at the floor, and suddenly he turned off his light. Then Raoul heard a faint click, and saw a very pale luminous square on the floor of the passage. It was as though a window had opened on the opera cellars, which were still lit. Raoul no longer saw the Persian, but he suddenly felt him by his side, and heard him whisper,
Follow me and do all that I do.
Raoul turned to the luminous aperture. Then he saw the Persian, who was still on his knees, hang by his hands from the rim of the opening, with his pistol between his teeth, and slide into the cellar below. Curiously enough, the Viscount had absolute confidence in the Persian, though he knew nothing about him. His emotion when speaking of the monster struck him as sincere, and if the Persian had cherished any sinister designs against him, he would not have armed him with his own hands. Besides, Raoul must reach Christine at all costs. He therefore went on his knees also, and hung from the trap with both hands.
Let go,
said a voice, and he dropped into the arms of the Persian, who told him to lie down flat, close the trap-door above him, and crouch down beside him.
Silence.
Raoul tried to ask a question, but the Persian's hand was on his mouth, and he heard a voice which he recognized as that of the commissary of police. Raoul and the Persian were completely hidden behind a wooden partition. Near them, a small staircase led into a little room, in which the commissary appeared to be walking up and down, asking questions. The faint light was just enough to enable Raoul to distinguish the shape of things around him, and he could not restrain a dull cry. There were 3 corpses there. The first lay on the narrow landing of the little staircase. The 2 others had rolled to the bottom of the staircase. Raoul could have touched one of the 2 poor wretches by passing his fingers through the partition.
Silence,
whispered the Persian. He too had seen the bodies, and gave one word in explanation.
He.
The commissary's voice was now heard more distinctly. He was asking for information about the system of lighting which the stage manager supplied. The commissary, therefore, must be in the organ or its immediate neighborhood. Contrary to what one might think, especially in connection with an opera house, the organ is not a musical instrument. At that time, electricity was employed for a very few scenic effects and for the bells. The immense building and the stage itself were still lit by gas. Hydrogen was used to regulate and modify the lighting of a scene, and this was done by means of a special apparatus, which, because of the multiplicity of its pipes, was known as the organ. A box beside the prompter's box was reserved for the chief gasman, who from there gave his orders to his assistants and saw that they were executed. Mauclair stayed in this box during all the performances, but now Mauclair was not in his box, and his assistants not in their places.
Mauclair! Mauclair!
The stage manager's voice echoed through the cellars, but Mauclair did not reply. I have said that a door opened a little on a staircase that led to the second cellar. The commissary pushed it, but it resisted.
I say,
he said to the stage manager,
I can't open this door. Is it always so difficult?
The stage manager forced it open with his shoulder. He saw that at the same time he was pushing a human body, and he could not keep back an exclamation, for he recognized the body at once.
Mauclair! Poor devil, he is dead!
But Mr. Commissary Mifroid, whom nothing surprised, was stooping over that big body.
No,
he said.
He is dead drunk, which is not quite the same thing.
It's the first time, if so,
said the stage manager.
Then someone has given him a narcotic. That is quite possible.
Mifroid went down the steps and said,
Look.
By the light of a little red lantern at the foot of the stairs, they saw 2 other bodies. The stage manager recognized Mauclair's assistants. Mifroid went down and listened to their breathing.
They are sound asleep,
he said.
Very curious business. Some person unknown must have interfered with the gas man and his staff, and that person unknown was obviously working on behalf of the kidnapper. But what a funny idea, to kidnap a performer on the stage. Send for the doctor of the theater, please.
And Mifroid repeated,
Curious, decidedly curious business.
Then he turned to the little room, addressing the people whom Raoul and the Persian were unable to see from where they lay.
What do you say of all this, gentlemen? You are the only ones who have not given your views, and yet you must have an opinion of some sort."
Thereupon Raoul and the Persian saw the startled faces of the joint managers appear above the landing, and they heard Moncharmin's excited voice.
"There are things happening here, Mr. Commissary, which we are unable to explain."
And the two faces disappeared.
"Thank you for the information, gentlemen,"
said Mifroid with a jeer. But the stage manager, holding his chin in the hollow of his right hand, which is the attitude of profound thought, said,
"It is not the first time that Montclair has fallen asleep in the theatre. I remember finding him, one evening, snoring in his little recess, with his snuff-box beside him."
"Is that long ago?"
asked Monsieur Mifroid, carefully wiping his eyeglasses.
"No, not so very long ago. Wait a bit. It was the night... Of course, yes. It was the night when Carlotta, you know, Mr. Commissary, gave her famous coac."
"Really? The night when Carlotta gave her famous coac?"
And Monsieur Mifroid, replacing his gleaming glasses on his nose, fixed the stage manager with a contemplative stare.
"So Montclair takes snuff, does he?" he
asked carelessly.
"Yes, Mr. Commissary. Look, there is his snuff-box on that little shelf. Oh, he's a great snuff-taker."
"So am I,"
said Mifroid, and put the snuff-box in his pocket. Raoul and the Persian, themselves unobserved, watched the removal of the three bodies by a number of scene-shifters, who were followed by the commissary and all the people with him. Their steps were heard for a few minutes on the stage above. When they were alone, the Persian made a sign to Raoul to stand up. Raoul did so, but as he did not lift his hand in front of his eyes ready to fire, the Persian told him to resume that attitude and to continue it, whatever happened.
"But it tires the hand unnecessarily,"
whispered Raoul.
"If I do fire, I shan't be sure of my aim."
"Then shift your pistol to the other hand,"
said the Persian.
"I can't shoot with my left hand."
Thereupon the Persian made this queer reply, which certainly was not calculated to throw light into the young man's flurried brain.
"It is not a question of shooting with the right hand or the left. It's a question of holding one of your hands as though you were going to pull the trigger of a pistol with your arm bent. As for the pistol itself, when all is said, you can put that in your pocket."
And he added,
"Let this be clearly understood, or I will answer for nothing. It is a matter of life and death. And now, silence, and follow me."
The cellars of the opera are enormous, and they are 5 in number. Raoul followed the Persian and wondered what he would have done without his companion in that extraordinary labyrinth. They went down to the 3rd cellar, and their progress was still lit by some distant lamp. The lower they went, the more precautions the Persian seemed to take. He kept on turning to Raoul to see if he was holding his arm properly, showing him how he himself carried his hand as if always ready to fire, though the pistol was in his pocket. Suddenly a loud voice made them stop. Someone above them shouted,
"All the door shutters on the stage! The commissary of police wants them!"
Steps were heard, and shadows glided through the darkness. The Persian drew Raoul behind a set-piece. They saw, passing before and above them, old men bent by age, and the past burden of opera scenery. Some could hardly drag themselves along. Others, from habit, with stooping bodies and outstretched hands, looked for doors to shut. They were the door-shutters, the old, worn-out scene-shifters, on whom a charitable management had taken pity, giving them the job of shutting doors above and below the stage. They went about incessantly, from top to bottom of the building, shutting the doors, and they were also called the draught-expellers, at least at that time, for I have little doubt that by now they are all dead. Draughts are very bad for the voice, wherever they may come from. The two men might have stumbled over them, waking them up and provoking a request for explanations. For the moment, Monsieur Mifroid's inquiry saved them from any such unpleasant encounters. The Persian and Raoul welcomed this incident, which relieved them of inconvenient witnesses, for some of those door-shutters, having nothing else to do or nowhere to lay their heads, stayed at the opera, from idleness or necessity, and spent the night there. They were not left to enjoy their solitude for long. Other shades now came down by the same way which the door-shutters had gone up. Each of these shades carried a little lantern and moved it about, above, below, and all around, as though looking for something or somebody.
"Hang it,"
muttered the Persian.
"I don't know what they are looking for, but they might easily find us. Let us get away. Quick! Your hand up, sir. Ready to fire. Bend your arm. More. That's it. Hand at the level of your eye, as though you are fighting a duel and waiting for the word to fire. Or leave your pistol in your pocket. Quick, come along, downstairs. Level of your eye. Question of life or death. Here, this way, these stairs."
They reached the 5th cellar.
Oh, what a duel, sir! What a duel!
Once in the 5th cellar, the Persian drew breath. He seemed to enjoy a rather greater sense of security than he had displayed when they both stopped on the 3rd, but he never altered the attitude of his hand, and Raoul, remembering the Persian's observation,
"I know these pistols can be relied upon,"
was more and more astonished, wondering why anyone should be so gratified at being able to rely upon a pistol which he did not intend to use. But the Persian had no time left for reflection. Telling Raoul to stay where he was, he ran up a few steps of the staircase which they had just left, and then returned.
"How stupid of us!"
he whispered.
"We shall soon have seen the end of those men with their lanterns. It is the firemen going their rounds."
The two men waited 5 minutes longer. Then the Persian took Raoul up the stairs again, but suddenly he stopped him with a gesture. Something moved in the darkness before them.
"Flat on your stomach,"
whispered the Persian. The two men lay flat on the floor. They were only just in time. A shade, this time carrying no light, just a shade in the shade, passed. It passed close to them, near enough to touch them. They felt the warmth of its cloak upon them, for they could distinguish the shade sufficiently to see that it wore a cloak which shrouded it from head to foot. On its head it had a soft felt hat. It moved away, drawing its feet against the wall, and sometimes giving a kick into a corner.
"Whew!"
said the Persian.
"We've had a narrow escape. That shade knows me, and has twice taken me to the manager's office."
Is it someone belonging to the theatre police?
asked Raoul.
"It's someone much worse than that,"
replied the Persian, without giving any further explanation.
It's not he.
"He? If he does not come behind us, we shall always see his yellow eyes. That is more or less our safeguard tonight. But he may come from behind, stealing up. And we are dead men if we do not keep our hands as though about to fire, at the level of our eyes, in front."
The Persian had hardly finished speaking when a fantastic face came into sight, a whole fiery face, not only 2 yellow eyes. Yes, a head of fire came toward them, at a man's height, with no body attached to it. The face shed fire, looked in the darkness like a flame, shaped as a man's face.
"Oh,"
said the Persian between his teeth.
"I've never seen this before. Pampin was not mad after all. He had seen it. What can that flame be? It is not he, but he may have sent it. Take care, take care. Your hand at the level of your eyes, in heaven's name, at the level of your eyes. Know most of his tricks, but not this one. Come, let us run. It is safer. Hand at the level of your eyes."
And they fled down the long passage that opened before them. After a few seconds that seemed to them like long minutes, they stopped.
"He doesn't often come this way,"
said the Persian.
"This side has nothing to do with him. This side does not lead to the lake, nor to the house on the lake. But perhaps he knows we are at his heels, although I promised to leave him alone, and never to meddle in his business again."
So saying, he turned his head, and Raoul also turned his head, and again they saw the head of fire behind their 2 heads. It had followed them, and it must have run also, and perhaps faster than they, for it seemed to be nearer to them. At the same time they began to perceive a certain noise of which they could not guess the nature. They simply noticed that the sound seemed to move and to approach with the fiery face. It was a noise as though thousands of nails had been scraped against a blackboard, the perfectly unendurable noise that is sometimes made by a little stone inside the chalk that grates on the blackboard. They continued to retreat, but the fiery face came on, gaining on them. They could see its features clearly now. The eyes were round and staring, the nose a little crooked, and the mouth large, with a hanging lower lip, very like the eyes, nose, and lip of the moon, when the moon is quite red, bright red. How did that red moon manage to glide through the darkness at a man's height, with nothing to support it, at least apparently? And how did it go so fast, so straight ahead, with such staring, staring eyes? And what was that scratching, scraping, grating sound which it brought with it? The Persian and Raoul could retreat no farther, and flattened themselves against the wall, not knowing what was going to happen because of that incomprehensible head of fire, and especially now because of the more intense, swarming, living, numerous sound, for the sound was certainly made up of hundreds of little sounds that moved in the darkness under the fiery face. And the face came on with its noise, came level with them. And the two companions, flat against their wall, felt their hair stand on end with horror, for they knew what the thousand noises meant. They came in a troop, hustled along in the shadow by innumerable little hurried waves, swifter than the waves that rush over the sands at high tide, little night waves foaming under the moon, under the fiery head that was like a moon. And the little waves passed between their legs, climbing up their legs, irresistibly, and Raoul and the Persian could no longer restrain their cries of horror, dismay, and pain, nor could they continue to hold their hands at the level of their eyes. Their hands went down to their legs to push back the waves, which were full of little legs and nails and claws and teeth. Yes, Raoul and the Persian were ready to faint like Pampin the fireman. But the head of fire turned round in answer to their cries and spoke to them.
Don't move. Don't move. Whatever you do, don't come after me. I am the rat catcher. Let me pass with my rats.
And the head of fire disappeared, vanished in the darkness, while the passage in front of it lit up, as the result of the change which the rat-catcher had made in his dark lantern. Before, so as not to scare the rats in front of him, he had turned his dark lantern on himself, lighting up his own head. Now, to hasten their flight, he lit the dark space in front of them, and he jumped along, dragging with him the waves of scratching rats, all the thousand sounds. Raoul and the Persian breathed again, though still trembling.
I should have remembered that Erik talked to me about the rat-catcher,
said the Persian.
But he never told me that he looked like that. And it's funny that I should never have met him before. Of course, Erik never comes to this part.
Are we very far from the lake, sir?
Asked Raoul.
When shall we get there? Take me to the lake. Oh, take me to the lake. When we are at the lake, we will call out. Christine will hear us, and he will hear us too. And as you know him, we shall talk to him.
Baby,
said the Persian.
We shall never enter the house on the lake, by the lake. I myself have never landed on the other bank, the bank on which the house stands. You have to cross the lake first, and it is well guarded. I fear that more than one of those men, old scene-shifters, old door-shutters, who have never been seen again, were simply tempted to cross the lake. It is terrible. I myself would have been nearly killed there, if the monster had not recognized me in time. One piece of advice, sir, never go near the lake. And above all, shut your ears if you hear the voice singing under the water, the siren's voice.
But then, what are we here for?
Asked Raoul in a transport of fever, impatience, and rage.
If you can do nothing for Christine, at least let me die for her.
The Persian tried to calm the young man.
We have only one means of saving Christine Daae, believe me, which is to enter the house unperceived by the monster.
And is there any hope of that, sir?
Ah, if I had not that hope, I would not have come to fetch you.
And how can one enter the house on the lake without crossing the lake?
From the third cellar from which we were so unluckily driven away. We will go back there now. I will tell you,
said the Persian, with a sudden change in his voice.
I will tell you the exact place, sir. It is between a set piece and a discarded scene from Roi de Lahore, exactly at the spot where Joseph Buquet died. Come, sir, take courage and follow me. And hold your hand at the level of your eyes. But where are we?
The Persian lit his lamp again and flung its rays down 2 enormous corridors that crossed each other at right angles.
We must be,
he said,
in the part used more particularly for the waterworks. I see no fire coming from the furnaces.
He went in front of Raoul, seeking his road, stopping abruptly when he was afraid of meeting some watermen. Then they had to protect themselves against the glow of a sort of underground forge, which the men were extinguishing, and at which Raoul recognized the demons whom Christine had seen at the time of her first captivity. In this way they gradually arrived beneath the huge cellars below the stage. They must at this time have been at the very bottom of the tub, and at an extremely great depth, when we remember that the earth was dug out at 50 feet below the water that lay under the whole of that part of Paris. The Persian touched a partition wall and said,
If I am not mistaken, this is a wall that might easily belong to the house on the lake.
He was striking a partition wall of the tub, and perhaps it would be as well for the reader to know how the bottom and the partition walls of the tub were built. In order to prevent the water surrounding the building operations from remaining in immediate contact with the walls supporting the whole of the theatrical machinery, the architect was obliged to build a double case in every direction. The work of constructing this double case took a whole year. It was the wall of the first inner case that the Persian struck when speaking to Raoul of the house on the lake. To anyone understanding the architecture of the edifice, the Persian's action would seem to indicate that Erik's mysterious house had been built in the double case, formed of a thick wall constructed as an embankment or dam, then of a brick wall, a tremendous layer of cement, and another wall several yards in thickness. At the Persian's words, Raoul flung himself against the wall and listened eagerly, but he heard nothing except distant steps sounding on the floor of the upper portions of the theatre. The Persian darkened his lantern again.
Look out,
he said.
Keep your hand up, and silence, for we shall try another way of getting in.
And he led him to the little staircase by which they had come down lately. They went up, stopping at each step, peering into the darkness and the silence, till they came to the third cellar. Here the Persian motioned Raoul to go on his knees, and in this way, crawling on both knees and one hand, for the other hand was held in the position indicated, they reached the end wall. Against this wall stood a large discarded scene from the Roi de Lahore. Close to this scene was a set-piece. Between the scene and the set-piece there was just room for a body which one day was found hanging there, the body of Joseph Buquet. The Persian, still kneeling, stopped and listened. For a moment he seemed to hesitate and looked at Raoul. Then he turned his eyes upward, toward the second cellar, which sent down the faint glimmer of a lantern through a cranny between 2 boards. This glimmer seemed to trouble the Persian. At last he tossed his head and made up his mind to act. He slipped between the set-piece and the scene from the Roi de Lahore, with Raoul close upon his heels. With his free hand the Persian felt the wall. Raoul saw him bear heavily upon the wall, just as he had pressed against the wall in Christine's dressing-room. Then a stone gave way, leaving a hole in the wall. This time the Persian took his pistol from his pocket and made a sign to Raoul to do as he did. He cocked the pistol. And resolutely, still on his knees, he wiggled through the hole in the wall. Raoul, who had wished to pass first, had to be content to follow him. The hole was very narrow. The Persian stopped almost at once. Raoul heard him feeling the stones around him. Then the Persian took out his dark lantern again, stooped forward, examined something beneath him, and immediately extinguished his lantern. Raoul heard him say in a whisper,
We shall have to drop a few yards, without making a noise. Take off your boots.
The Persian handed his own shoes to Raoul.
Put them outside the wall,
he said.
We shall find them there when we leave.
He crawled a little farther on his knees, then turned right round and said,
I'm going to hang by my hands from the edge of the stone and let myself drop into his house. You must do exactly the same. Do not be afraid. I will catch you in my arms.
Raoul soon heard a dull sound, evidently produced by the fall of the Persian, and then dropped down. He felt himself clasped in the Persian's arms.
Hush,
said the Persian, and they stood motionless, listening. The darkness was thick around them, the silence heavy and terrible. Then the Persian began to make play with the dark lantern again, turning the rays over their heads, looking for the hole through which they had come, and failing to find it.
Oh,
he said.
The stone has closed of itself.
And the light of the lantern swept down the wall and over the floor. The Persian stooped and picked up something, a sort of cord, which he examined for a second and flung away with horror.
The Podjablasu,
he muttered.
What is it?
asked Raoul. The Persian shivered.
Oh, it might very well be the rope by which the man was hanged, and which was looked for so long.
And suddenly, seized with fresh anxiety, he moved the little red disc of his lantern over the walls. In this way he lit up a curious thing, the trunk of a tree, which seemed still quite alive with its leaves, and the branches of that tree ran right up the walls and disappeared in the ceiling. Because of the smallness of the luminous disc, it was difficult at first to make out the appearance of things. They saw a corner of a branch, and a leaf, and another leaf, and next to it nothing at all. Nothing but the ray of light that seemed to reflect itself. Raoul passed his hand over that nothing, over that reflection.
Hullo,
he said.
The wall is a looking-glass.
Yes, a looking-glass,
said the Persian in a tone of deep emotion, and passing the hand that held the pistol over his moist forehead, he added,
We have dropped into the torture chamber.
What the Persian knew of this torture chamber, and what there befell him and his companion, shall be told in his own words, as set down in a manuscript which he left behind him, and which I copy verbatim. End of chapter 20.